Evolution of Ukraine's relations with the West, from Russia's full-scale invasion to the present. On February 24, 2022, Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, marking a pivotal moment in European security and global geopolitics. This act of aggression, condemned by the United Nations General Assembly and the International Court of Justice, shattered the post-Cold War order in Europe. Ukraine, under President Zelensky, appealed to the West, primarily the United States, the European Union, NATO allies, and the United Kingdom, for support, framing the conflict as a defense of democratic values against authoritarian expansionism. The West's initial response was swift but cautious: condemnation, sanctions and humanitarian aid, but with hesitancy on direct military involvement to avoid escalation with a nuclear-armed Russia. From the outset, Ukraine's relations with the West evolved from a partnership of convenience to a deep strategic alliance. Prior to 2022, Ukraine had aspired to Western integration, with NATO aspirations dating back to the 2008 Bucharest Summit and EU Association Agreement signed in 2014. However, Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 and the ensuing conflict in Donbass had elicited only limited Western support, including non-lethal aid and sanctions. The 2022 invasion changed this dynamic, catalyzing unprecedented military, financial and diplomatic assistance. By September 2025, Western aid to Ukraine had surpassed $500 billion collectively, including military hardware, economic support, and reconstruction funds. Yet, this evolution has been marked by tensions, aid delays due to political debates, fears of escalation, and shifting U.S. administrations. It is needed to consider and realize all the chronicles the key phases of Ukraine-West relations from February 2022 to September 2025, analyzing how they deepened amid battlefield realities, diplomatic summits, and geopolitical shifts. This analysis draws on timelines of aid, NATO and EU developments, and policy changes to highlight an evolution from reactive support to institutionalized partnership, while underscoring challenges like donor fatigue and Russian resilience. The invasion caught the West off guard, despite U.S. intelligence warnings of Russian troop buildups. In the early days, Western leaders focused on diplomacy and deterrence. On February 24, NATO activated its response force for the first time, deploying additional troops to Eastern Europe, but rejected Zelensky's calls for a no-fly zone to avoid direct confrontation. The EU, historically divided on Russia policy, unified rapidly. On February 27, it approved €500 million in military aid via the European Peace Facility, a first for the bloc in funding lethal weapons. Sanctions were the West's immediate weapon. The US, EU, and UK froze Russian central bank assets, disconnected select Russian banks from SWIFT, and targeted oligarchs and energy sectors. By March, these measures had devalued the ruble by 30% and isolated Russia economically. Humanitarian aid surged as over 4 million Ukrainians fled westward, with the EU granting temporary protection status to refugees. Military support ramped up gradually. The U.S. provided Javelin anti-tank missiles and Stinger anti-aircraft systems, totaling $13 billion by year's end. The UK sent NLAW missiles and trained Ukrainian forces. NATO's Madrid summit in June 2022 strengthened Ukraine's comprehensive assistance package, promising long-term support without membership. Ukraine's EU candidacy was granted on June 23, a symbolic boost amid battlefield successes like the liberation of Snake Island and Kherson. 2022 represented a shift from pre-invasion ambiguity, where Western aid was mostly non-lethal, to active enablement of Ukraine's defense. This evolution stemmed from moral outrage over atrocities like Bucha and strategic fears of Russian dominance in Europe. However, limits persisted: no Western boots on the ground, and restrictions on using donated weapons against Russian territory, reflecting escalation concerns. By 2023, the war had settled into a grinding stalemate, with Russia entrenching in occupied territories. Western support evolved toward sustainability, focusing on training and advanced weaponry. The U.S. committed Patriot air defense systems in December 2022, delivered in early 2023, while the UK pledged Challenger 2 tanks, prompting Germany to follow with Leopard 2. Total Western military aid reached $118 billion by year's end. NATO's Vilnius summit in July was a milestone. Allies waived the Membership Action Plan for Ukraine, affirming its path to membership when conditions are met. However, no invitation was extended, disappointing Kyiv amid its summer counteroffensive, which reclaimed limited territory but failed to breach Russian lines due to minefields and artillery superiority. Public support for NATO membership in Ukraine soared to 77%. EU relations advanced. Accession negotiations were recommended in November, with talks opening in December. The bloc provided €34 billion in macro-financial assistance and integrated Ukraine into its energy grid. Sanctions expanded, with the European Union's 12th package targeting Russian diamond imports. U.S. policy under Biden remained steadfast, with $66 billion in security assistance by mid-2023. Yet, congressional debates delayed aid, foreshadowing future fatigue. The UK, under Rishi Sunak, committed £2.3 billion annually. This phase highlighted the West's growing commitment to Ukraine's long-term integration, but also exposed vulnerabilities. The counteroffensive's limited gains eroded optimism, and Russia's alliances with North Korea and Iran complicated Western strategies. Relations evolved from emergency aid to strategic investment, with Ukraine's resilience earning it a seat at Western tables. 2024 saw intensified Russian assaults, including missile barrages on energy infrastructure, while Ukraine launched incursions into Kursk Oblast in August. Western aid adapted. In May, NATO permitted Ukraine to use donated weapons against Russian border targets, a policy shift. The U.S. provided ATACMS missiles, and total aid hit $182 billion. NATO's Washington summit in July established a new command for Ukraine training and reiterated membership commitments. EU accession talks began in June, with screening completed by November. A €50 billion Ukraine facility was launched for 2024 to 2027. However, escalation loomed. North Korean troops aided Russia in Kursk by April 2025, retroactively noted in 2024 reports. U.S. elections introduced uncertainty, with Trump's victory signaling potential aid cuts. 2024 marked peak institutionalization. Ukraine's EU path accelerated, and NATO support became operationalized. Yet, war fatigue emerged, with European publics questioning endless funding amid economic strains. Relations evolved toward mutual dependency, with Ukraine's fight bolstering Western deterrence against Russia and China. Under President Trump, U.S. policy fluctuated. Aid paused in March after a Zelensky meeting but resumed amid congressional pressure. By July, new packages were announced, totaling $66.9 billion since 2022. Europe compensated, with €167 billion in aid by June. The UK pledged £18.3 billion. NATO clarified in March that membership was not guaranteed in peace deals. EU talks progressed, with a modernized DCFTA agreement in June. By September, discussions focused on post-war guarantees, including a multinational force. Putin rejected Western troops, threatening escalation. Russia gained 180 square miles in July-August, but Ukraine's drone strikes disrupted Russian logistics. Over 500,000 Russian casualties underscored the war's toll. This phase reflects maturation. From Biden's unwavering support to Trump's pragmatic adjustments, relations emphasize sustainability. Challenges include U.S. isolationism and Russian attrition tactics. Ukraine-West relations have evolved from ad hoc crisis management to a multifaceted alliance. Initially reactive, 2022, they became proactive, 2023 to 2024, through institutional frameworks like NATO's CAP and EU candidacy. By 2025, amid U.S. shifts, Europe led, providing 60% of aid. This reflects a rebalancing. The U.S. focused on Asia-Pacific threats, while Europe assumed greater responsibility. Key drivers: Ukraine's battlefield tenacity and Zelensky's diplomacy galvanized support. Public opinion shifted, with Ukrainian NATO support at historic highs. Challenges include escalation fears, evident in delayed permissions for strikes inside Russia, and political volatility, as seen in Trump's aid pauses. Aid fatigue is real. Smaller donors like Estonia lead per capita, while larger ones debate costs. Geopolitically, the war exposed Western divisions but unified NATO, deterring further aggression. Russia's partnerships with North Korea and Iran highlight multipolar risks. Ukraine's EU path offers reconstruction anchors, potentially adding economic value. As of September 2025, Ukraine-West relations stand as a testament to solidarity amid adversity. From $380 billion in pledges to EU accession talks, the evolution underscores a commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty. Yet, with the war unresolved, Russia advancing slowly, Ukraine holding Kursk, the future hinges on sustained support. Peace negotiations, including G7 commitments in May, remain elusive amid Putin's intransigence. For lasting peace, the West must balance aid with diplomacy, ensuring Ukraine's integration fortifies global security against authoritarian revisionism.